Imagine this. A body is found in a locked apartment. The door was bolted from the inside. There are no witnesses, no murder weapon, no obvious motive. And yet, within 72 hours, a detective walks into a police station, points to one person in a lineup, and says, "That is the killer." How did they do it? How does a detective starting from absolute zero, from a cold and silent crime scene, reconstruct the full truth of what happened? That is exactly what we're going to explore today, slowly, deeply, and with real examples, so that by the end of this video, you will understand the entire mind and method of a criminal investigator. So stay with me, because this is going to be one of the most fascinating things you have ever learned. Every detective story begins at the same place, the crime scene. And the crime scene is not just a location, it is a story. It is a frozen moment in time where the past has left its fingerprints, and the job of the detective is to read every single one of them. When a detective first arrives at a crime scene, the very first thing they do is something that might surprise you. They do nothing. They stop. They observe. They breathe. They look at the entire picture before touching a single thing. This is called the walkthrough, and it is one of the most important steps in any investigation. A good detective treats the crime scene like a museum, where every object has a story, and disturbing even one thing too soon can destroy a clue forever. For example, imagine a detective walks into a room and notices a coffee cup on a table. That cup might seem completely unimportant, but the detective notices that the coffee inside is still slightly warm. That means the person who made this coffee was here very recently, within the last hour perhaps. That single observation from an ordinary coffee cup has just given the detective a timeline, and a timeline is one of the most powerful tools in any investigation. After the initial observation, the scene is documented. Photographs are taken from every angle, every piece of furniture, every crack in the wall, every window, every door. Everything is recorded, because the detective knows that in the coming days and weeks, they will need to return to this room in their mind, and every photograph is a door back in time. Then, slowly and carefully, the physical evidence collection begins. Fingerprints are dusted and lifted, footprints are measured and photographed. Any blood, hair, or biological material is collected and sealed into evidence bags. This physical evidence is the foundation of any case, because physical evidence does not lie, it does not forget, and it cannot be intimidated. Now, let us talk more deeply about physical evidence, because this is the heart of detective work. Physical evidence comes in many forms, and each type tells a different part of the story. The first and most famous type is fingerprints. Every single human being on this planet has a unique set of fingerprints. No two people have ever been found to share the same pattern, not even identical twins. So when a detective finds a fingerprint at a crime scene, they have found something extraordinary, a biological signature, a personal stamp left behind by the person who was there. For example, in a famous real case, a burglar wore gloves during the entire robbery, but before leaving, he took off one glove to check his phone. He touched a single windowsill for just 2 seconds. That 2-second touch left behind a partial fingerprint that identified him and sent him to prison. 2 seconds, 1 touch, case solved. The second major type of evidence is DNA. DNA stands for deoxyribonic acid, and it is essentially the biological blueprint of every living person. DNA can be found in blood, saliva, hair roots, skin cells, and many other bodily materials. Even a single strand of hair left at a crime scene can be analyzed and matched to one specific person on Earth. This technology has not only convicted guilty people, but has also freed innocent people who were wrongly imprisoned, in some cases decades after their wrongful conviction. The third major type of evidence is trace evidence, tiny, almost invisible materials like fibers from clothing, soil from shoes, glass fragments, or even pollen from a specific location. For instance, if a suspect has a particular type of rare clay on their boots, and that same clay is found only in one specific field outside the city, the detective can place that suspect at that exact location. These microscopic clues are often the ones that break a case wide open. Physical evidence tells the detective what happened, but witnesses tell the detective how it felt, what they saw, what they heard, and what seemed unusual. Interviewing witnesses is a sophisticated and deeply psychological skill. A good detective knows that human memory is not a video recording. It is fragile, it is influenced by emotion, and it can change over time. So when a detective sits down with a witness, they do not immediately ask, "Who did you see?" Instead, they ask open-ended questions like, "Tell me everything you remember about that evening." And then they listen. They let the witness talk without interruption, because sometimes the most important detail comes at the very end, almost as an afterthought. For example, a witness might say, "The car that drove away was blue, normal-looking car. Oh, and actually, now that I think about it, one of the taillights was broken." That broken taillight, mentioned almost accidentally, becomes a critical lead that narrows down the search to a specific vehicle. Detectives also know that witnesses under stress often focus intensely on one specific thing, called the weapon focus effect. If a crime involves a weapon, witnesses often remember the weapon very clearly, but have poor memory for the attacker's face. A skilled detective accounts for this and knows not to place too much weight on facial descriptions given by people who are in fear. Instead, they cross-reference multiple witnesses, look for the details that appear consistently across all accounts, and treat any single witness's statement as one piece of a much larger puzzle. Once the detective has gathered physical evidence and spoken with witnesses, they begin building a timeline. A timeline is exactly what it sounds like, a chronological map of events. What happened first? What happened next? Where was each person at each moment? Timelines are constructed using phone records, security camera footage, credit card transactions, witness accounts, and even digital data from smartwatches or GPS devices. Every modern person leaves an enormous digital trail, and detectives are trained to follow that trail precisely. For example, if a suspect claims they were home alone on the night of a crime, but their phone records show their device connected to a cell tower 3 miles from the crime scene at the exact time of the incident, that alibi collapses instantly. Alongside the timeline, the detective investigates motive. Motive is the reason a crime was committed, the why behind the what. The 3 most common motives in criminal cases are money, jealousy, and revenge. When a detective understands the motive, they can narrow their list of suspects dramatically, because not everyone has a reason to commit a specific crime against a specific person. For example, if a wealthy business owner is murdered, the detective immediately asks, who benefits financially from this person's death? Who stood to inherit money, take over the business, or collect on an insurance policy? That question alone can reduce a list of hundreds of possible suspects down to 2 or 3 people. One of the most fascinating tools in a detective's arsenal is criminal profiling, the science of understanding who a criminal is based on how they committed their crime. A criminal profile does not tell detectives exactly who the suspect is, but it tells them what kind of person to look for. Profilers analyze the method of the crime. Was it planned or impulsive? Was it clean and organized or chaotic and rushed? Was the victim chosen randomly or specifically targeted? These behavioral clues paint a portrait of the offender's psychology. For example, a crime that is meticulously planned, leaves almost no evidence, and targets a specific victim suggests an organized, intelligent offender who probably knows the victim personally, is familiar with the location, and has planned this for some time. On the other hand, a chaotic, messy crime with multiple errors left behind suggests someone acting impulsively, under stress, possibly under the influence of substances, and probably with a criminal history of reckless behavior. Famous criminologist John Douglas, who served for decades in the FBI, used profiling to help catch some of the most dangerous criminals in American history. He would study crime scene photographs for hours, not looking for physical evidence, but reading the emotion behind the crime, the rage, the control, the desperation. And from that emotion, he would describe a human being with remarkable accuracy. Once the detective has gathered sufficient evidence, physical, testimonial, digital, and behavioral, they present their case to a prosecutor. The prosecutor reviews the evidence and determines whether there is enough to make an arrest. If the answer is yes, an arrest warrant is issued, the suspect is apprehended, and the formal legal process begins. But the detective's job does not end at the arrest. They continue to support the prosecution, testifying in court, presenting evidence clearly to a jury, and ensuring that every piece of the case is unshakable under cross-examination. Because in a court of law, evidence that seemed iron solid during the investigation can sometimes be challenged, questioned, or reinterpreted. The detective must be prepared for every question, every counterargument, and every attempt to cast doubt. The entire process, from the first moment at the crime scene to the final conviction, can take months, sometimes years. It requires patience, intelligence, attention to the smallest details, deep understanding of human psychology, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. A great detective is not someone who simply finds criminals. A great detective is someone who finds the truth, even when the truth is complicated, even when it is painful, and even when it leads somewhere no one expected. So the next time you watch a crime drama or read a mystery novel, remember, real detective work is not about dramatic hunches or miraculous luck. It is about discipline. It is about science. It is about asking the right questions, listening to the answers, and following the evidence wherever it leads, no matter how long it takes. That is how a detective solves a crime. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video valuable, please like, share, and subscribe for more deep dive educational content just like this. Leave a comment below telling me what part of detective work surprised you the most. I read every single comment. See you in the next one.